Welcome to Wealth Mavericks. On today's episode, we're talking about the financial blind spots even the most successful people often don't realize they have.
If you are experiencing what you feel like is overpaying in taxes, it doesn't have to be that way forever, but the choice is yours. You have to make a decision. I don't even know who to trust. Well, You've got to have a team who's looking at it holistically and then teaching you, how do I use this asset to my benefit down the road?
Welcome back to the podcast. I have Joe with me today, and we're going to talk about a simple idea that has big implications when it comes to your money and the future you're building. And that's that you don't know what you don't know. And it may sound obvious, but it's actually one of the biggest things we see in our work. People come to us and they are super smart, very successful. They've saved money, invested, hired professionals, and on paper, it looks like they've done everything right. But once we start mapping things out of their full picture, we almost always uncover things that they never knew were there. So, Joe, as we go through this process, what's one of the most surprising things you see when we start to dive deep into a member's financial life?
I don't think it's surprising to us anymore, but when you see redundancies like that are causing like inefficiencies in their wealth building, it's one of the most common things that we see right off the bat. Again, we talk a lot on this channel about the siloed nature of the financial services world, and even sometimes advisor to advisor. They may have had an advisor that they invested 200 grand with, years ago, and they're managing that portfolio, and they've got another, advisor that's more recent, and they've got $1 million with that person or whatever it might be. And individually, they're not doing anything wrong, but they're not looking holistically. And so these silos create inefficient drag on your wealth building. And not saying that redundancy is bad in and of itself. Illustration that I like to use in talking about this is as a skydiver. Redundancy is a good thing. I have my main parachute and I always have a reserve parachute. It's there to save your life in the case of, a malfunction with your main canopy. And your reserve is packed differently than your main canopy is packed. It's going to come out and it's going to inflate and you're going to be okay. So redundancy in the right place is very good. But redundancy for redundancy's sake is not necessarily efficient, and it's not good for you. So, for example, we'll get, members, if you're unfamiliar with our process, people go through a discovery or look at your tax returns and kind of get a very high level overview of what we can do to help you. Then if someone moves forward in our phase one, we actually get all of their documentation. So all of their assets, we want to take a holistic view at everything. And what we find is an individual advisor, let's say, for example, in their 401k, has got things allocated a certain way to make sure that they're, reducing risk and maximizing returns. And then they've got an advisor over at Edward Jones who is, doing X, Y, and Z with their account. So we see this as it comes in. And for example, there's one recently where we had someone who had it was 100 and I want to say it was 180,000 plus in cash position in the vehicle that should be most aggressively stanced. Right. But the advisor who was overseeing that wanted to provide more liquidity, I guess. I don't know for what reason. And it's our members' job is not to look at all that and understand what's going on. That is someone's job to come in and look at that. So, for example, if you've got cash that's sitting somewhere and then you've got cash equivalents in your holdings all over the place, that is an inefficient drag on wealth building. It's like an anchor to that portfolio. Now, we get it. Like advisors are looking at hopefully they're looking at your risk score or your risk tolerance, and they're building portfolio models that make sense for that. But for example, you may be like, for us, if we're looking at like whole life policies that are going to yield 5 to 6%, and it's essentially a 0% risk. Like on a risk score, it's like zero. It's going to be there. It's going to grow. It's going to do its thing. But that can help offset somewhere else where you should be more aggressive if you're looking at equities markets or in crypto or things like that, where you could be very aggressively stanced in those assets because holistically you're covered by this lower threshold on the other side. So it's not surprising anymore. It's just we see it almost every time is inefficient growth of their assets because no one's looking at holistically. They're just looking at their little silo and trying to make sure you're protected in that one.
You mentioned cash value life insurance. I feel like that's another place where oftentimes people have been sold this years ago from an insurance person and then they just sort of forgot about it. They've been paying a pretty high premium.
Mm.
Um, it's been building up value, but then when they actually look at the performance, it has not performed well, or they don't even
They
understand
don't
that
know
it
how to
is
do anything with it.
right. That it's actually an asset. It's not, I mean, yes, it's life insurance, but it is a great asset if it's designed correctly. But most insurance people are not designing it the right way, right?
No. And I would say, so actually just on the life insurance side as a whole, let alone whole life versus term and all that, most of the doctors who come to us are grossly underinsured.
Mm,
So there's two different things that we look at when we're looking at insurance as a vehicle. One is, yes, the death benefit. Like in the event of your passing, is your family taken care of? And there is a very specific formula that we can go through. We want to maximize what you can get from that, both from a whole life and term perspective, while reducing the cost. So that's just the death benefit. I'd say most of the people who come to us are underinsured when we're looking at that. The other side, and what you're alluding to, is the asset side. So I think insurance is a really interesting vehicle, and there's actually rules in the with the IRS that disallow, if your cash value exceeds your death benefit, it's actually treated differently and it's going to be taxed because
mm,
they recognize that vehicle is a very powerful vehicle if used properly. It's an overpowered vehicle perhaps. So they cause limitations to happen. So when
mm,
our team comes in, we do what we call it the bank of view analysis. So this is, how do we set this up, the cash value policies, to actually become your bank down the road. I've also, like, people have heard the term like infinite banking. Um, there's another term for it. Anyway, but this concept of infinite banking that I think most advisors are using incorrectly. They're like, wouldn't you rather borrow money from yourself rather than the bank if you're going to go buy a car? And it's like, okay, so you're going to take this asset and you're going to go buy a depreciating asset with all this money? That doesn't make sense.
mm,
Yes, it's better than maybe paying a bank, but pay yourself. So that tool used for wealth accumulation can be very powerful if done properly. And I would just say there is so much noise in the market on social media, people watching, TikTok influencers and Instagram and Facebook, and you see a million different things. You're like, I don't even know who to trust. Well,
yeah.
you've got to have a team who's looking at it holistically and then teaching you, how do I use this asset to my benefit down the road? And I will say this, like, the other thing is, the way that insurance policies get structured really matter a lot. And Bob says this all the time. And I think this is probably another subset of things that we see all the time is, he talks about the illustration of special forces. Like when they're doing an operation, they spend more time planning the extraction than they do infiltration. Infiltration, you've got the secret, you're surprising them. So it's like there's only so much that's going to go wrong on infiltration. Got to plan it, got to do all that. But the extraction, now you don't have the element of surprise. And now all of a sudden, all hell's breaking loose and you got to have exit point A, B, C, D, to end.
Mm,
Um, the same thing is true with your assets. As you structure your assets, you've got to be thinking about the end in mind. How am I going to extract in a way that maximizes the benefit to me? And the way that insurance policies get written, the way that they get underwritten, the way that they get disseminated really matters. And I know this is crazy to say, but I'm going to say it, and I hope this pisses off a bunch of people. Um, there are insurance agents that will place doctors in policies because that carrier provides the international trip for that year.
mm,
That's wild to me. They've got a handful of carriers and they tend to go, like, literally the reward trips for the top producing insurance agents. They tend to go domestic, international every other year, and they tend to flip flop. So they're going to use this company this year and put as many people as they can because they want that international trip to London. I don't know, whatever it might be.
yeah.
That is such, I don't think I can swear on this, but that's such BS. It makes me so angry. The other thing is they can choose how their commissions come to them. So as they're placing the policy, they can front load it or they can equal load it over the policy. Our job for our members is to load these policies so they maximize the cash benefit to our members. That's exclusively what we're looking at. So, and then lastly, there are other, like, riders that can be a part of the policies. We only choose the carriers that have the right riders that kind of cover these ancillary things. Um, there's one more element that I wanted to mention. Oh, convertible. So allowing that it when we place term insurance, making sure that it's convertible in the future to whole life or permanent policy, without you having to go through all the blood work and the urine and all that kind of stuff. So there's some really, really critical things that we are planning upon extraction for our members that most insurance agents, honestly, and I'm not trying to be cavalier with this comment, but they have no freaking clue. They don't even understand how their own products work.
It's wild. I've sat on obviously hundreds of meetings now, and I can't believe how lucky I feel to be learning all of this and be getting paid to learn all of it. Because I mean, I'm a grown adult. I have a financial advisor, I have an insurance person. I'm like, I've never been taught any of these things.
Right.
When deciding where to invest or what insurance to buy or whatever, I was never given that education. You're kind of flying blind. You're like, well, I think this is what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
So most of our doctors have never experienced that either. And when we start asking them those questions, like, well, why did you do this? Or what? I don't know. That was 10 years ago. Or
Right.
my buddy is a insurance person and sold it to me.
Right.
That's wrong.
And I to be clear, I don't think they necessarily have like ill motive. I don't think
Right.
that they're,
No.
it's not malicious. It's just the industry of financial services is set up to do one thing really well, and that is to extract fees from the people who participate in their products. That's why Bob calls them the financial distributors. That's all they're doing. They're just
Love it.
distributing financial products and hope that people buy them and don't ask questions.
Yeah. I mean, we could list out a lot of things that we find, but I don't want to give it all away or make this podcast too long. But I would
Right.
say another big piece of it, obviously people come to us because they're paying too much in taxes. And so we can help remedy that very quickly this tax year. But once we dive deep into your whole plan and show you currently what you hold, here's what's taxable now, here's what's taxable later, and here's what's tax free. And here are our plans to get as much of that into the tax free bucket as possible. I think unless you have a whole team working on your behalf, it can be very difficult to understand and put a plan in place that makes your dollars tax free forever.
Right.
Because you just think, oh, I'm kicking the can down the road. And once I retire, like I'm going to have a huge tax burden.
Hmm.
So, why is that? Why do
Well, because the IRS is really, really smart. We look at the IRS as your business partner. Like they're your best friend in so many ways. And I wish people really could understand this. Like the way that we view the code is not like how do we find that way to sneak something in or how do we find this loophole people talk about a lot. It's not loopholes. It's a legal system and we understand that system and they've given it to us as business owners or as high income earners. They've given us ways to maximize what we do because they know in the end, if we are productive with our dollars, they know what we're going to do with it. We're going to invest it and we're going to create more companies and we're going to create more taxpayers and help everybody. So they
Yeah.
give us all these gifts. So I think that's the first thing is most people don't even know, like they're playing checkers and it's not even chess. It's like 3D chess that's available. And we've gotten very good at 3D chess. So I think that's the main element that people need to understand is there is a much bigger system that you can take advantage of. I would just be willing to bet a lot of money that your current team does not know how to do it. They are still playing checkers.
You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And even our smartest, most savvy people who've been doing it on their own, it's not the language you speak. No matter how much research you do, you're never going to replace the expertise that comes with the
Yeah.
years and years that have been put in here, really.
Yep.
So, as we always say, we really work to make it as low risk as possible to explore what's possible.
Hmm.
I say it in my ad videos like, hey, if you think there has to be a better way, you're right. And it's just a matter of, is it worth my time to investigate it a little bit further? Because it's so easy to say like, well, I don't really have the time or, but it's your money, it's your future. It's all there for you if you're just willing to put in the effort and we
Right.
want to help make it as easy as possible.
Well, and that you use that term, you don't know what you don't know. And if I can tie back again to skydiving, I was about 50 jumps into my skydiving career, and I was going to do a jump with someone, and my instructor was kind of like, because he listens to, I love him to death because he's just like, he's always looking out for me. And he was like, oh, you're going to do that, huh? And I was like, yeah, I guess so. I didn't know what I didn't know. So in that particular jump, it's very possible for one person to accelerate really rapidly. Like they might go from 120 miles an hour to like 170 miles an hour in that particular jump. And oftentimes for newer skydivers, what happens is you get uncomfortable in that position. You go back to belly flying, which slows you down to 120 miles an hour. Well, if you both do that, one person slows down, you could have like a 50 to 70 mile an hour collision in the air. They call it meat missiles, right? You could have this meat missile experience where literally that's how people die in skydiving. I wasn't even aware of this. I had only been belly flying. So I didn't even know what I didn't know. And once he brought that to my attention, all of a sudden it opened up all these other thoughts like, oh, well, what about this? And what about that? So it was like this learning, because once you know, you know. And so I think right now, so many of our doctors who are listening to this, you don't know what you don't know until a team comes in and shows you. And then it's like, oh, finally. So yeah, again, Doc, we have made this as no-brainer as possible. Like we've reduced the mental cognition that it takes to say yes to us. You know, if you are experiencing what you feel like is overpaying in taxes, it doesn't have to be that way forever, but the choice is yours. You have to make a decision. You are choosing to continue to live in that world. And if you choose to do nothing about it, shame on you. That's not on us. We're trying to help you. So engage.
Amen. On that note, thanks for joining us. We hope it was helpful. Come back next time. And until then, go be a Wealth Maverick.